project teams are really critical in businesses, particularly when we're thinking about continuous improvement. Now, anything significant that we need to do to move our organisation on is probably going to need a team to do it well. And this tool, the 8-step cycle, is a way to kind of manage those teams through a process that gets to some really good outcomes. So the cycle's been put together mainly with this to sort of stop this situation where we set a team off with a problem and something to solve. They rush off and they're trying to solve the problem, find a solution, implement the solution, and then we find 12 months time they're still kind of working on it, they haven't quite implemented it, or they've implemented part of it, and by the way, we've got 20 of those projects running in the business, and I lose count of the amount of businesses I go into where they've got 10, 20 projects on the run, but over the course of a 12-month period, very rarely do they see something through to completion and implement it and get the value they expected from that project as a consequence. So what we do here with the 8-step cycle, it's about saying, okay, what we need to do is we need to, before we do anything else, is stop at stage 1 and go, we need a brief. That often is missing with the project team. What is the brief? What are we actually trying to achieve here? What's in scope? Also, what's out of scope? Often projects need to be scaled back, to be doable. We can always come back to stuff that's out of scope later. Doesn't mean it's not important, but having that brief is really, really critical. It's then really important before we go run off and trying to work out ways to solve the problem, is to stop and go, okay, what is our current reality? Where are we now? In an IT world, they talk about current state. Let's get really clear about what's going on today, what are the problems we're facing, what are the challenges, why are we hurting? Why are we even here? And I think once you get that clarity, that enables you then to sit back and move to the next box, which is the where box, which again, in a technology world, they'd call ideal state. It's really, really healthy here to put a pair of rose-tinted glasses on and say, look, let's assume we can solve this problem, we can deliver the best outcome around this project. What would it look like? Let's create that perfect picture, that promised land outcome we want from this project. The important thing of doing it here is if you do it here and do it with that rose-tinted glasses, it stops that kind of negativity around what people going, what isn't possible. What I find when people run enough trying to work out the solution is that there's a lot of talk about, oh, that won't be possible, or that we won't be allowed to do that, or that won't be cost effective. Let's just pretend anything's possible and let's paint that perfect picture. Because then when you move through, and you start to, you move to the next box, which is about data. If you can get data, that's obviously useful, because at some point we're going to want to be able to justify a reason for doing something on this project, and good actually early doors to do a draft plan, which is the next box, because let's just again assume that we can go from where we are now to where we want to be. But then when we move into what is the solution, it's incredible when you've stopped yourself jumping to solutions, which is a big part of this model, how you actually then you try and find the solution to that perfect outcome, how much of it is possible and how much more you can achieve, and obviously how much better an outcome you get. So the final part after, once we've now developed a solution, is then to sort of pull together that draft plan and solution into, a business case that says, okay, this is actually what the solution looks like to achieve the outcome that we want to achieve. It will have some sensitivity around, realism and commerciality at this point, I'm sure, and the plan will be more evolved. But what we're looking at this point is to be able to put a business case together to a board or to somebody that says, we thought we had with this problem, we put this project together, we went around this process, and at the end of it, actually there is a case to do something that has a return on investment that will be beneficial to the business. Don't be frightened at this point to say, what, we thought this was something we should be doing, and what we actually realised is that actually we're not sure there's a benefit in doing this. Better at this stage to kick it out rather than waste months and months trying to implement something that's never going to give you benefit. So what you tend to get to with this is, what the research says over about 25 years is between 1 and 7, the timeline to do that in a business typically is about 8 weeks. Now it doesn't mean you spend about a week at every stage. It just says that what the research says is that project teams typically will surge off on a bunch of activity when they have a project, then lose a bit of interest, a bit of momentum, and then they'll dip down to nothing or very little activity, and just before some kind of presentation is required, they'll ramp it back up again. And if you cut out that waste in the middle and just focus on the time needed to actually do this well enough to get to a business case, it's around about 8 weeks. So, and obviously then, once you've got that business case signed off, if you choose to do it at all, that's the point then to say, now let's implement. So now we're implementing, knowing exactly what we're implementing, how we're going to do it with a plan. So 8 weeks plus implementation, if you did that continually through the year, suddenly you're getting real momentum and real traction on getting projects for continuous improvement through the business that typically, although you'd have lots of projects going on, in truth, very few of them making a big difference to your business. I think the final point in this as well is it's a really good process to put checkpoints in. I mean, for me, a definite checkpoint would be at the end of that business case section. But also, maybe you have some. You say we do require a checkpoint after the brief. We want to make sure that our brief is tight before we move forward. I mean, checkpoints can go anywhere you want them to, depending on your business. but put those checkpoints in that are relevant to you, but definitely make sure you have that check and balance that says we don't implement until we've signed off that this is actually going to work for us and this is going to deliver the improvement we thought it would give us. So that's the 8-step cycle. Great for bringing project teams together and working in a focused way, stops you jumping into solutions and wasting time, and ultimately gives you more traction on your business improvement.